management group that we cannot put another management group above. And this management group is the root parent, if you will. And all management groups underneath that and subscriptions underneath that have a parent-child relationship with one another. So for example, in our diagram here, these subscriptions, their parent is the root management group. And the other management group, its parent, is the root management group. And maybe this management group has other management groups and subscriptions under it, and it is the parent of some child subscriptions and child management groups. And this supports 6 levels of hierarchy here with management groups. Now, the compliance support for management groups is Azure Policies and Azure Role-Based Access Control. we can deploy something known as Azure policies into our management groups, and that will trickle down to all the other management groups and subscriptions underneath it. Because of this parent-child relationship, it all kind of flows down in a waterfall method, as well as the role assignments with our role-based access control roles. And so this allows us to implement at various scopes at the subscriptions or management groups to flow all of these compliance objects down to control our environments. If you're familiar with Active Directory, this is sort of similar to a domain or forest, and you have organizational units. It's not apples to apples, but it is something that you can kind of use to help you get an understanding of this concept. Now, to understand the hierarchy here, let's take a look at our root management group. This root management group is the top level resource. It is the parent or grandparent or great-grandparent of everything that will fall underneath it, all the way down to 6 levels of hierarchy. So let's say under this root management group, we have a marketing management group. And so the root management group is the parent, the marketing management group is the child. And maybe underneath this root management group, we have other child objects, such as a EA subscription or an IT management group. And maybe under the IT management group, we have another management group. And so there's another parent-child relationship here. And we have a US management group. And there could be other subscriptions underneath this. We won't go down to 6 levels of hierarchy here. And also, as we see here, maybe we have inside the marketing management group some trial subscriptions for the marketing team. And we have 2. Maybe they're broken up over various purposes. Maybe one is a free trial that's being used for development, and another one is a free trial that's being used for production that will maybe go pay-as-you-go as they develop out these environments. So this helps us get an understanding of the hierarchy here with the parent-child relationship and how we have this root management group. And this, again, can go all the way down to 6 levels of hierarchy here. And we can use this to create a organizational hierarchy for our Azure cloud environments. Now, in terms of scoping, it's important to understand that, again, things like role-based access control will flow down. So we can use these management groups as scope levels. For example, we have users that we want to provide access for a specific management group using a contributor role, for example, so that they can act as contributors for the IT management group, but they can also have these contributor role assignments flow down into the other management groups and subscriptions that are underneath this IT management group. And we can do this all over our organizational hierarchy here. We could set the scope to the root management group, and then it will flow down to everything inside of our organization. We could set it to a specific subscription so that it will just flow down to everything that is deployed inside of that subscription. So in terms of deployment, our resource groups and our Azure resources inside of that subscription. All right, Gurus. Now at this point, we're done conceptualizing the understanding of management groups and the overall purpose of them, now I'm going to make my way into a non-Azure Cloud Sandbox environment. Again, this is a non-Azure Cloud Sandbox environment because you won't have this functionality inside of the Azure Cloud Sandbox. But I wanted to show you visually from the perspective of the Azure portal what creating a management group looks like and the different things that we can do with management groups. So if you'll join me over here in the portal where we can get started looking at management groups. So if I come up to the search bar here in the Azure portal and were to type in management groups, it would pop up under services. But because I recently visited this service to kind of set up some of this demonstration here, I see it under recent services. So I'll select it here. And what we see in this hierarchy here in kind of a drop-down format is we have a tenant management group. And underneath this tenant management group that is at the top level that nothing else can be above, it is the root parent. Underneath it, there are two child objects here. There is a subscription and there is another management group. Now, I don't have any access to this tenant root level management group. And that is because I don't have a role assignment for it. But I do have a role assignment for the subscription underneath it here. And that is why I can use this subscription with the specific role assignment that I'm assigned. And in this management group, I created this so I control the assignment here. Now, there are no subscriptions underneath it because I didn't create a subscription underneath it. But I just wanted to illustrate this in terms of the Azure portal so that we could see how this plays out and how I don't have access to this. But I do have access to this management group because I created it. And I could create another management group underneath it here. I could add subscriptions. I don't have another subscription to add. I could rename this group. I could delete it. And we see it tells us the parent management group. It tells us any child management groups and the total subscriptions that it contains, which is 0. And it says my access level here is the owner since I created it. And if I wanted to here, go ahead and create a child management group under this management group demo here. You call this the management group IT. And I could provide the display name. Now it's important to remember the management group ID here cannot be updated after creation, so you'd have to delete it and recreate it if you wanted to change that. However, we can modify this display name. We're going to leave it here. We're going to click submit, and it is going to create a child object in the form of a management group underneath this management group. Now, in this management group here, we'll see that I could do things like set up identity and access management using RBAC roles, which we'll learn about more in a later section of this course. It just kind of helps us to illustrate what management groups are for here by looking at this. I could view my access here if I wanted to see. You see I'm the owner. Obviously, I created it. Now, I could also add role assignments or look at role assignments I already have. Let's say I want to add a role assignment. I could specify what role assignment I want to give. Maybe I want to say, for this management group, I want to give someone billing reader so that they can read all of the billing related to this management group and all management groups and subscriptions underneath it. And it would flow down from this scope here. I'd select it, and then I'd select the member I want to provide it to. I'll select one of my users here, click select, and now I could review and assign. It'll tell me I'm providing the billing reader role at the scope of this management group and the member that I provided this to. Click review and assign, and it's going to add that role assignment, which we now see here under role assignments. Also, we're going to learn about more later how we could use policies and use management groups as a scope of assignment for policies that we want to use. For example, if we wanted to provide tagging for our resources, we could go here to definitions, and we could take a look at all the possible definitions, and one of them will be tagging. So if I come here and go to category and unselect all and type in tag, I'll be able to select tags, and this will give me all of the policy definitions that are related to tagging. And so I could set this here. I could add a policy to require a tag and its value on resources at a specific scope. I could scope this to a management group or a subscription. And if we're at a management group, it would flow down to all the management groups and subscriptions underneath that. And if it were at a subscription, it would flow down to all of the resources inside of that subscription. All right, gurus, I just wanted to quickly show this to kind of provide a visualization of how this looks in the Azure portal. Let's make our way back over to the slides for a quick review. Okay, gurus, so the things that I want you to take away from this lesson using management groups is that we use management groups to provide a set of hierarchical structure for organizations. For example, as we've seen here and in this diagram, we have a root management group. And underneath this, we may have subscriptions and other management groups, and these are child objects of the root management group. And this can continue down 6 levels of hierarchy here. Now, for the root management group, It's important that we understand that we are not given access to this by default. And that's because Microsoft is very careful about providing access to this, as it would provide access to do things throughout your entire environment. The root management group cannot be moved or deleted, and we can use RBAC roles to provide access to these management groups that we've created. However, there's a caveat. For the root management group, we would have to have global administrator access inside of our Azure AD tenant and a global administrator in our Azure AD tenant, which we'll learn more about later when we get into the identity section and talking about roles in this course. But for now, just understand, if you have a global administrator Azure AD role assignment in your Azure Active Directory tenant, you can elevate yourself. That's why we might do this. It doesn't have access to do whatever it wants inside of your organization. All right, gurus, thanks for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. For now, I've been Chase. Stay. Howdy and welcome, gurus. I'm Chase, one of your Azure training architects here at ACG, a Pluralsight company, and it's in this lesson, Understanding Azure Policy. And we're going to start off by defining what Azure Policy is using a layman's term reference to help us understand policies in general. Then we're going to take a look at breaking down the components of Azure policies. And then we're going to take a look at a policy example use case inside of Azure. And then we're going to wrap up this lesson with some key takeaways. So let's jump right into it. So to help us better understand Azure policy, I'm going to use a real-life reference from my life so that we can understand in layman's terms what policies are generally trying to accomplish. Now, policies are typically a set of rules. So let's say for this example, that there's a dog park nearby me, and I want to take my dog, Kanu, to the park. Now, Kanu is a Shiba Inu, which is a specific breed of dog, if you're not familiar with that. And let's say this particular park that I'm going to take Kanu to has some signage out front that dictates the rules of the park. The lay of the land is displayed here on this signage, and it says that no Shiba Inus are allowed. Well, certainly, this is trying to display a series of rules that have been laid out by this park, and whoever is in charge of the operations of this park. In this case, Shiba Inus, they're a stubborn breed, as I know from personally owning one. Kane is probably going to throw a fit, and she's going to be out of compliance and go into the park anyways because she's not one for rules. Now, this is exactly the type of thing that policies try to prevent. Policies, much like the policy example we saw here in Azure, have the purpose of enforcing compliance and enabling auditing for situations in which things are not compliant so that we can determine what remediation steps are necessary. Because organizations need to implement enterprise-level governance and compliance in their Azure environments, and this is possible through Azure policies. Using Azure policy, we could do things such as prohibit resources. Maybe we want to control costs inside of our environments, and we want to prohibit specific VM sizes inside of our environments. Or maybe we want to restrict service access to specific services that we know we're not going to use, so that we can prohibit those resources from being used and ultimately generating costs inside of our subscriptions. We also may have requirements to enforce allowed locations where we can deploy resources inside of Azure. For example, let's say we're an organization that operates inside of the EU, and because we operate inside of the EU, we have to be compliant to data sovereignty rules of GDPR. And so we need to make sure that workloads that we're deploying for those related purposes inside of the EU follow specific geographical compliance requirements. And so these are things that we can accomplish using Azure policy. Now that we understand what Azure policy is, let's actually take a look at breaking down the components that make up an Azure policy here. Azure policy as a service really only has two major things that we need to concern ourselves with. And first and foremost, that is Azure policy definitions. And these definitions define what it is that we have in place for specific rules. For example, allowed locations. We define that as a criteria for compliance. We say that if you're going to be compliant with this policy, you're going to need to allow resources in a specific location and that location only. And inside these policies, we can define the actions that will take place if you're in a non-compliant state. For example, if you're trying to create resources that are not in the allowed location, well, maybe it's going to deny the deployment of those resources. Or maybe it's just going to audit it so that we can go back and look at it later and see that someone violated a policy we have in place. And once we've created policies and defined our policy, we then have policy assignments. And this is where we're actually putting those policy definitions into play. We're actually making sure that not only do we define the policy, but now it is in play, taking action inside of our environments, and we set this at a specific scope. And for example, a scope might be something like a management group or a subscription. And we could use this scope that we have to enforce our policy on everything lower in the hierarchy. So if we enforce it at a management group, it will feed down to all the subscriptions, resource groups, and resources nested underneath that. Now, the next thing that we have to think about is sometimes we want to assign more than one policy. Sometimes we want to have a cluster of policies, if you will, and this is known as an initiative definition. And this is a collection of policies that are tailored to achieve a singular high-level goal, and using various policies together as part of an initiative, we can ensure that we're achieving this goal. Because maybe we don't want to write a policy for one high-level goal. Maybe we want to break it into various components, such as ensuring that VMs meet standards, and this could be from things such as allowed location to tagging to VM sizing, and we can just bundle all of these policies up into an initiative definition and make a policy assignment using this initiative definition. Alright, Gurus, now that we've taken a look at the components of a policy, let's go ahead and take a look at a real-life use case of a policy example here in the slides. For example, this policy is going to be require tags. So first things first, as an organization, with a policy that wants to require tags instead of our Azure environments, we need to generate a policy definition. And this is going to be a policy definition that evaluates if a virtual machine is being created with our tag, project, and tags are a key value pair. So in this case, the project is key, and AZ104 is actually the value of that. If the VM is missing this tag, then we're going to deny the creation of that resource. Once we've defined this policy, we're then going to assign this policy. And again, that assignment is setting the policy to specific scope. For example, a resource group where the VMs will be created. So in this case, let's say we have this resource group and we want to enforce a policy on this resource group. So to accomplish this goal, we make a policy definition to require our specific tag, and then we assign that at the scope of the resource group. And now because we've done that, any resources that we try to deploy into this resource group that don't have the tagging will fail. For example, if we try to create a virtual machine inside of this resource group, and we create it without the appropriate tags, it's going to fail that deployment. It will not pass validation, and we won't be able to deploy that virtual machine. Now, if we were to, at deployment time, give it the appropriate taggings, we'd be able to successfully deploy this resource. So now that we have a good understanding of Azure policies in action, using this policy example, I'm just going to hop real fast into the Azure portal just to show you a little bit about Azure policy and what it looks like visually from the portal. You don't have to follow along in this as it's not a formal demonstration. I just wanted you to be able to see this from the portal so that you can get a policy under services. And here I'm in the overview of information authoring section. I'm going to modify it to do exactly what you need it to. And then we see where we're going to applications. I'll select it. It's a built-in policy, and I can choose to either duplicate this or export it so I can work on it and modify it, or I can just click assign. And here, this, because I've made it an exclusion. I'm not going to add any of those. And then I'm going to see here, we have the policy enforcement. If this is enabled, it'll mean that this policy is going to deny resources when it's in and next, next, click create, and it's going to go off and create this policy assignment for us. So this can take about 30 minutes for you to see it take effect and start seeing it inside of the compliance dashboard. So I'm going to take a quick pause and I'll come back when that is done. Alright, gurus, so now here we see under assignments in the authoring portion of the left-hand blade, we have that assigned allowed locations policy. And if I go over here to compliance dashboard on the Azure policy, I'll see here that it has finished evaluating the environment, and we can take steps to first groups. We now have the ability to allowed locations, specific allowed VM SKUs. These can all go through a common standard of enforcing a specific initiative. Howdy and welcome, gurus. I'm Chase, one of your Azure training architects here at ACG, a Pluralsight company, and that's in this lesson, tagging resources. We're going to start off by describing what resource tagging is in terms of Azure. And then we're going to talk about the resource tag assignment hierarchy that we have for Azure so that we can understand how we might use resource tagging inside of Azure and the different criteria that it has for actually creating tags. Then we're going to take a look at a demonstration where we're going to go through the process of actually tagging resources inside of the Azure Cloud Sandbox.
hello everyone.
Same period, roughly the same hardware. Cost us 40 million plus 120.
Programming languages to build verified software that at large companies like ours doesn't quite match, followed by an expression, never mind, the guard returns to his position, and the conversation process. And this is kind of the area. Now we can also use another fact, is the creator of OCaml, Xavier Leroy, and email to either me or my advisor earlier. We'd be happy to part of programming languages.
Your organization probably doesn't want to improve things. Last week, I had a fascinating conversation with a reader around frustration and unhappiness at work. Much of it was totally obvious to both of us, but it occurred to me that this probably isn't to everyone, which is why almost all of my colleagues in a very cushy, non-stressful jobs nonetheless need therapy. I have a completely orthogonal thought why this happens, but we'll let them cook, okay? Let's let bro cook. Let's let Tim cook. Can we let Tim cook? If it isn't obvious to everyone, it's worth writing about. I think it would have been after a line like this. I think it should have ended with, and if this isn't obvious, you are probably in therapy. Now, I believe that this stems from a failure to recognize the gap, frequently vast, between what is being said by a person and what is being felt, and how this discrepancy applies to the organization too. It was sparked by reference to a concept called home tatame divide. The hone tatame divide. Hone tatame divide. I don't know what that means, which are Japanese concepts related to the true feelings of an individual and the front they present in public. I don't actually know anything about Japanese context beyond this one Wikipedia article. That is so good. So this has been dropped entirely so that it seemed hold on, let me do this again. So this has been dropped entirely so that I seemed worldly and to give us vocabulary less onerous than what you really think and what you are forced to say. Okay, tatame. I have never met a single manager at any large company that has not said they want to be data-driven. I have also never seen a single one of them take any steps that could actually move them in this direction. My boss does this all the time. We're very data-driven. Nonetheless, the average annual salary for a Power BI developer, what is since it's capital P, capital BI, what is this? Developer places them in the 90th percentile of my country's annual income. For those of you unfamiliar with Power BI, you connect it to data sources and then it makes visualization for managers to gawk at. And it is so simple to use that it is not inconceivable to me that you could actually train a monkey to make a bar chart with the correct application of positive reinforcement in peanuts. Okay, there are a handful of people who do amazing things with Power BI, but the hard truth is that most people who work in it are really just dragging and dropping bar charts onto a page after connecting it to a spreadsheet, being paid absolutely exorbitantly, and then if they are smart, going home and despairing. This is because Power BI tracks usage metrics and almost all dashboards are completely unused. Oh, I don't even know what this stuff is. My current organization has 8,000 staff members, and I used to glance over the usage metrics of the dashboards my old team produced. I believe 3 dashboards were used, out of somewhere around 50 to 100. Wow, that's a lot of non-usage. Of those, Power BI is the bottom, a power bottom which can switch to top. I read that out loud. I just read that out loud. Thanks, Ryan Winchester. For the you know what? You made me read that. I read your name out loud. So figure out that one. Twitch YouTube. And it will be better once this current initiative successfully completes, even though we have never demonstrated the ability to successfully complete a similar initiative at any point in the past. Ooh. 2. Hone. I'm feeling a little hone, if you know. These 2 pressures that drive the garbled stream of corporate of nonsense at organizations. Okay, I think I read that wrong, but we're going to keep on going. Sounds familiar. Let's see. Sturgeon's Law. The first one is very simple, and I sometimes lose sight of it while I am deep in the theory minds of incentives and other smarter takes. 90% of everything is crud. And that explains almost everything. Most managers have never had an independent thought on how to manage people effectively, hence the agile parenting. Most programmers don't know what an abstraction is, etc., etc. These are overwhelming factors, even though it isn't a satisfying answer, but it has done more for my own peace of mind than anything that follows. I don't know how I feel about this. When I read these kind of things, I don't like the take, and this is a very common take, that is just this look that everybody else is stupid, and I have just reached some plane of enlightenment. Now, he may not be realizing he's saying this, but that's how I read this. Is that I have realized the problems, but 9 out of 10 people are too stupid to realize what I realize. Maybe I have too much faith, but I just don't believe in that. I don't like that. I've never liked that style of thinking. I never think it's good. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's something that you want to do, right? I think most people, if anything, have just never had the chance to do something more than they are just told, right? And so they act that way, right? It's a form of more learned pretty good as an Olympic trained hard. If we lose because Derek didn't turn up for practice for 6 months, I might be pissed off and upset, but I am not spiritually confused about why my efforts aren't rewarding me. Okay? I actually really like this analogy. I have no idea what possesses us to turn up at work and think we can accomplish anything with fucking Derek over there calling the shots while slamming their empty head onto a keyboard as rapidly as Jira will allow him to create cards we won't finish. But for some reason, it's a thing that happens. So, somewhat fair. Let's kill Derek. Let's just murder Derek. I'm not sure if I feel good about that, but okay. Derek will repeat whatever brain-dead thing is in vogue, but they are very stupid and will repeat literally anything that sounds popular. Plus, will never question that they have never heard an unambiguous success over their entire career. This means they will inevitably become promoted over time. Because unlike the rest of us who have put in effort and pay what a friend of mine terms soul cost to act like a sycophant, they believe it sincerely. Again, I just don't really like this take. Again, I feel like it's pretty smug, I feel like, if anything, you could literally invert this argument onto the writer of said thing. You just look at everyone as brain dead. I'm failing to see it through so much just belief that everybody's just a turd. Here's the pressure if you're in the 10% of people that aren't crud at their jobs. You're surrounded by people that are crud. Don't get me wrong. I am that terrible person at many things. There are fencing teams where I'd be absolutely dead weight. My piano playing leaves much to be desired. Last week, I managed to stub the little toe on both feet on the same day on 2 separate occasions, and I have on at least one occasion absentmindedly dropped a teaspoon into the trash instead of the tea bag. These are just totally normal human problems, right? However, I don't do, again, I also hate this statement. Anyways, sorry, I am actually having a really hard time with this article. I really dislike just full degradation of people. Anyways, however, I don't do any of that professionally. In professional settings, approximately all of my time goes into solving problems introduced by people that are just indescribably bad. I personally find that it only takes one bad person. It's never, I don't believe in this 90% rule, right? I think that are able to argue about something that are just indescribably bad. I personally find that it only takes one bad person. It's never, I don't believe in this 90% rule, right? I think that this is what happens. I'm going to give you a different take on this, okay? I'm going to give you a much different take. You have one person who does believe what they're doing is the right way to do things, and I do not think that they're wrong. They think they have the best way to do something. Again, the continuous drive towards DX, this continuous drive towards what feels best for developers, this continuous drive for this made-up idea that somehow if you just do things right, it will be best. If you do it my way, my DX is better than your DX, right? And they get into this position where they actually are able to argue about something because they invented something that really works. Say Falcor at Netflix, okay? This is a great example. And so now you have somebody that's in charge of these developer tools, these developer experiences, right? And they've made something that was semi-successful. So we're like, okay, this guy knows what they're talking about. Let's do this. And so what ends up happening? You have one person who spends all their time thinking about a problem. They know all the vernacular. They know all the pitfalls. They know all the common complaints. So feels really difficult, but you don't know how to express it. You just simply know something is wrong. So what ends up happening? You should argue both sides of this. Is 90% of people literally the different languages and all the different box art, okay? Why does nobody ever know you did something Greek upon infrastructure and code if left unchecked? Is there any Christ in both of my first, second, and perhaps even third hand experience? Whatever that means, it's possible that put out onto the branches, but all to no avail. How can such an unnatural entity exist? The master replied, you perceive this immense structure and are disturbed that it has no rational purpose. Can you travel the world for a year? Instead, I would have continued to provide for my family and find a new job or something different, but I understand the sentiment of becoming super upset. Oh, while he was away, a new position to open up in the same department for the same job title, and it was a permanent role. Theoretically, exactly the same job he was doing in an identical team with the same managers. I think it's a little bit... There is a good piece of advice here, which is creating. Before you kind of... I'll know you... Systemic change. Even if you never find... These are endless gyrations. You're at a job, because fuck them, why not? I do, and they the same managers. They gave me that job. All the money he asked for, plus another hefty sum on top of it. Management saying there's no budget means nothing. Yeah, you're Shamir. It is okay to use a totally different language from industry standard language like OCaml for web backend. Why not? I mean, the thing is, industry standard, whatever that means, right? Industry standard, does that mean Java? Right? Remember, Go is now pretty popular. Java's pretty popular. Is Rust getting popular? TypeScript has been on the decline, which is great. And so it's one of those things where, what is industry standard, A, but B, what is the purpose of you building a web framework? Or not building a web framework, but building something in the web in OCaml. Is it so that you learn OCaml? Yes, you're going to learn OCaml. But what else are you going to get out of it? You're also going to get out a distinct knowledge of how to build a website, which is completely transferable between languages. Languages are just a way to express an idea, and when you have the idea understood, expressing it is much easier, even if the syntax to the expression is unknown. Right? It creates a moat around your job because no one knows OCaml. Boom. Right? Yes, industry standard equals DX, which equals what I like. Fair. But what I mean is that you learn what something means and like how to scale it, how to do things. And so you don't need your side projects to always be excelling what you do in your full-time job. Typically, how I think about it like this, honestly. Let's just do this for a second, because I think this is kind of important. Because I see this stuff all the time. Thank you, Valini. I see this all the time, which is people have this notion that what they're working on, their work, which maybe is in Go, Java, whatever, it's how about it's TypeScript in front end, and when they build their little side project, right, that they get in the lesser hours of their day, right, however long this looks like, you know, their fun side, right, they literally use TypeScript, right, they just do front ends, right, they use all the same stuff from here into here. And I don't do that because that's not what I want to do. It's because there's a future point that I think exists where I'm working on something different. Future work. What I want. Where I want. And what I want to do is I typically try to make my future work... Oh, let's reverse that arrow. I make my fun side reflect where I want to be in the future. For the last 2 years, I programmed countless hours of Rust for my side projects without being paid ever a single dime to write Rust. What you're doing the name is the Primogen. How working at Fang makes your life harder. Personal little secret, I'm always hard. That's why I just never have a problem.
In this video,
understand that approach. To me, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't think there's any problem with the website having the website code. Easy search, source graph. Use source graph, dog. Right? Like, there's tools for searching intelligently over a series of repos. The way to do continuous delivery is the reason. They can't scale deployments at a company that have tens of thousands of engineers. Okay, fair. That's fair. It's to justify expensive company issued work laptops. Oh, okay. Anyways, maybe, yeah, I guess Netflix never got that big in the sense that I think we're only at a couple thousand engineers. But all of our stuff deploys independently. So there's not really, you know, we have this thing called Kronos, which is like every single thing that gets deployed gets a Kronos ping. Every single change to production gets a Kronos ping. And so whenever production starts suffering from someone's push, you effectively go to Galactus and you ask it when was the at 4:15 we started going down, what just went wrong? And it's just like, oh, it's right here, these changes happened. So you go to those changes and you just track down who made those changes, right? You find that, dude, I bet I do. You want to hear a crazy story? I changed a line of code, or I changed a fast property to start doing something, and at that exact moment, 1 minute later, Netflix caught on actual effing fire. It turns out somebody else used an automated job to launch a different property, and that automated job launching a different property had a bug in it where it used the last person's name who manually adjusted it as the person who automatedly adjusted it. So I did that good hand job, gave it a good value, and then some robot job comes along, screws up everything, and bam, it is on fire. Things are terrible. I just happened to be the person testing their pipeline for them because it was like a new pipeline. And so I was like, hey, I have a project that could really use like some automation to it. Why don't we just test out to see if I can do these production changes super quick? And they're like, okay. And I mean, I had my boss calling my personal phone at like 5 in the afternoon, like, yo, where are you? You need to get on right now. And I'm like, what the hell happened? What the hell is going on? Dude, I'm getting pings from all over. Multiple coworkers hit my personal phone. It was crazy. It was crazy.
repository can be upwards of 50 gigabytes or more and tens of millions of lines of code. Having such a large code base means that your local development environment won't work the same way that you're used to if you're coming from a smaller company. Things like
I love this clearly is ChatGPT. Where's this guy even looking? Learn to code the slow way. All right, first off, I do want every last person here to know that this is a boot.dev sponsored article read. Wags Lane, as he is named inside this chat. Oh, so aptly named somewhere in here. Tell you this much. You never tell your friends. I can tell you don't work at Netflix because you never tell your friends you work at Netflix. You know why? Because in IRL, when you say you work at Netflix, you know what you get? Hey, you get a free subscription. You know what Netflix should do? You know what they should do? Hey, sit down. I'm going to tell you what Netflix's business plan for 2025 should be. Hey, trust me, this is a great one. Every effing time. You know what I say to people in real life? Oh, where do you work? Oh, I work at a startup. Oh, what do you do? Tech for TVs? Oh, cool. That sounds hard. Yeah, it's pretty hard. Honestly, that's it. I literally never tell people because it is just the worst experience. Quicksand questions are all about finding shortcuts. I need a developer job in 3 months. What's the best way to do that? Ooh, I like this. I've seen you laid out 20 courses in your back-end learning path, but wink, wink, which ones can I skip? Ooh, I like this. Quicksand questions. It reminds me of, I believe Mary says this in Lord of the Rings Book 1, which is shortcuts lead to long delays. Shortcuts lead to long delays. I absolutely have always loved this phrase. Pippin says it. It wasn't Mary, it was Pippin, you dummy. Okay, anyways, I've always loved that phrase because it's so much of software engineering is attempting, is attempting to shortcut things. And I argue that don't ever shortcut. Whole asset instead. Work harder instead of trying to, work harder instead of work smarter instead of harder. People use that expression to shortcut all the time, right? You should work smart, be smart, but you got a full asset. Stop half-assing, right? What's wrong with shortcuts? Now, I want to be clear. There is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to take the shorter path toward a career goal. This is true. That's called wisdom. You take the shortest and most direct path to the place you want to be. Absolutely. Anything else would be insanity. If there was a pill to turn you into a senior developer overnight, I'd encourage you to pop that. Okay, interesting. Let's find out. The tech scene is a cluster asterisk of complexity. I learned like 10 different programming languages in college, and even 3 years into my degree, I still don't know that I ended up with is a declarative system. Having a breadth, like it's good to have that good T curve, right? You want a mastery. You want to start developing a mastery in something. But I think people pick the first thing as the thing they're going to master. And then their T curve, well, trust what you say a lot more. It's wild. If you knew exactly what concepts you need to master to pass your first discouraging leak code saying, in case they decide that this is a fact of life. Every PM has their own vision of Agile. This is a fact. Every hiring manager has their own 7-step interview process. Facts. Every job requirement requires different bits of arcane knowledge. Facts. You have no idea what you'll be doing day to day at your first job when you are starting to learn to code. I hear people say things like, I never even use my DSA skills at work. And upon further inspection, it turns out they are a WordPress developer. Don't dunk on Lambo Lang, okay? If you're unable to know, if you don't even have the language to describe the set of problems you're looking at, you are literally reinventing it. So I shouldn't be interested in the shortest path. You should. It's just not where you think you'll find it. The shortest path to a job as a programmer does not involve minimizing the amount of things you need to learn and build. That sort of thinking results in a much longer, more mentally exhausting journey. Something like this. Jump directly into web framework, probably Next.js, since you're basic AF. Yep. Got him. Find you have a talent for building to-do apps. Realize you can't build a hello world without a tutorial. Attempt to remedy that by doing more tutorials. Read on Twitter that actually Rust is the best language. Admit defeat at the hands of the borrow checker. Repeat steps 1 through 4 n times, where n is a d4 roll times your stubbornness. You just gave the 7 steps to tutorial hell right here. This is actually super beautiful. It's super beautiful because you should be able to write, or at least conceptually have 30 to 50% of what Next.js does in your head. Like file-based routing, just take a second to think about what it's actually doing. Why is that only an Express app, right? That's what it's doing. It's just doing the Express for you for a job. Yes, and so a big thing I would add on there is when building, build something that you want to use. I think that is a huge requirement. And then I would also toss in, build things in areas that you don't know a lot about. your ideas. The real thing is that people screw up here. That's rich quick scheme. It's a get upper middle class slow scheme. This is a great statement. Get statistically above. I can't begin to tell you how many PRs I've reviewed that fix something but are just patch of a patch because the dev never grokked the underlying problem. For example, an ex-Java dev, it's always a Java dev, finds that sometimes this function in Go panics. Send email. So they go straight to Google and find that panicky in Go can be solved with a recover. So they open a pull request. Ba-bam, ba-bam. Okay, this kind of works. But a better developer would try to understand and fix the underlying problem in the code. They would add nil checks or just stop using pointers altogether for this function. Real talk, that is great. I've been guilty of I've been guilty of this. We've all been guilty of this. Sometimes it's easier just to take this step. Namespace. Facts. It's not the advice you wanted. Getting fit, giving up addiction, building a business. This was a great article. This is just 10 out of 10 advice. Okay? And I think that you should go and check them out. Okay? Hexing the technical interview. I'm going to turn off alerts now. Here we go. Camera, throb me, camera. A micro kitchen must be within how many feet? It's nothing personal. I have never reassured a room anything. So my name is the company. By the way, this is cue for you to not be a dummy. Perhaps you could tell me a bit about your background. He hasn't read your resume. No man can. This is fair. This is actually fair. In the winter, you begin, above the ice-locked fjords. A stupid story to a word problem. How about you just tell me the problem? You know, like, I'm not a kid, you're an adult. Let's be adults, you know? When I have a problem with somebody, unless if this is some sort of, like, Prophet Nathan story to Daniel or David, I am not telling a story, right? This is not a gotcha. A tradition sets down, probably never finished. You're a bad person. That's probably the likelihood because nobody actually writes Clojure other than Uncle Bob. Let's see. Well, we're not doing IO here. It's just an in-memory list. Agree politely. Lazy sec. You apologetically. You know, if I could, I hope one day that I can interview and they say, I'm not really a Clojure expert. What's this for? Just boilerplate. Don't worry about it. Tim appears, if anything, on everything but the problem. There's usually some reflection going on. It looks like you built a class loader specifically to return a single byte array for a particular class. Is that normal? Yes. You insist. Flashing dangerously. I put the S from eyes here and didn't say it right there. What is wrong? A beautiful man. The kind like from the movie. Some other nice city for so many stanzas in section 4.1. We're using version 49 because it doesn't require stack maps, which keeps things simple. Blinks, but isn't 17 decimal 23 not 22? Again, you recite sing song till Javasen. Beg your pardon? I don't know how to do this. The Javanese. Surely you have heard of him. He is a small magical man, something like a gnome who inhabits every JVM. What we're seeing here, I've worked in some embedded. Okay, well done. Your method, a static Hermes TypeScript C, would have produced roughly 580. We have saved a lot by omitting the stack map and line mappings, of course, but we have also cut the number of variables and cut the superfluous A store and A load ops as well. And of course, since this class is never instantiated, we don't need the jumping
to the definition, opening up a class.
Uses a sapling file system for monorepo. They claim that LSPs couldn't work. It was instead of adopting another language. Code active picture of how developers develop. Right? Okay, you can tell right away that this guy right here is definitely a developer and not an actor, because you can see that he's chicken necking hard, right? His ears are almost to his elbows. Okay, so you can really tell right away that this guy is truly a developer, like just really leaning forward on that code. Clearly, product manager. No one wears a two-piece. I'm not sure what this even is going on here. What the hell's happening over here? Nobody knows what's happening. Well, because it's the scale. And when it dies from... Okay, I'm confident you got this, but this is like not going to be good for you long term. We really got to think about this in a long-term situation. So I'd immediately, like, you'll notice one thing right away, that his head is way too high on his monitor, okay? You're definitely going to want to change things up. You're going to want to raise that monitor up a little bit. You're definitely going to want to change some things. You're definitely going to want to roll back your shoulders, okay? Roll them back. Then you want to you want your head to be over your shoulders. You know what I mean?
Just Android, then any problem you encounter is almost certainly a company like Airbnb. And finally, the third category is the leadership team. So this is the director or VP of engineering.
Amazing value. It was a no. Sometimes, what is that unique back-end URL associated with? And I went to the database, or the SDK team, or the API team as we called them, and I said, API team, what is going on here? They explained that they took your Java program that you were writing, compiled it into bytecode, stored your back-end. This is at this time. It's long changed since then. But store that in a Cassandra database, and when a call was being made, it actually load that specific back-end code and run it, so that each UI had its very own specific backend that's perfectly tailored to that exact moment.
Your shoe bargain is a guise for a malware scam.
At least 10 million Singapore dollars was lost to malware scams in Singapore, and that's just within the first 6 months of this year. The number of victims, only 7.
A screenshot of it, and you just put in the pin, right? My gosh, that's really scary.
And met someone who nearly lost her life savings to scammers.
I saw my DBS app flash open. I'm like, OMG. And then it hit me. He is remotely controlling my phone. And then I saw my UOB app flash open. And then I saw OTP request. Wow, in full panic mode.
Okay.
So I tried to off my phone and I couldn't.
So in this episode, I want to find out who is behind these sophisticated scams.
Overseas.
For cyber criminals. Same period last year. About a quarter of online scam cases last year involved personal data being stolen, including malware scams. Nguyen Huang finds learning how to create malware online. But where are these tutorials found?
I can show you right now.
I'm about to find out how easy it is to create a malware.
Wow.
On their own.
Criminal, they share with me another tip to make money that stealing US identity. So basically, it contains a lot of sensitive information like full name, date of birth, social security numbers, driver license number, and also like banking account.
Hugh Min Law was arrested in 2013 for stealing purse, but in 2019, Hugh was released early due to good behavior. Today, he uses his hacking skills to bait criminals for Vietnam Cybersecurity Agency.
So how easy is it to create malware?
We show to the hacker how to do it. So after that, I combine the open source, become like this malware builder.
So it's just building an app. I just choose what I want in it, and it'll build it automatically.
Right. And then you can buy with an original APK like Instagram, WhatsApp, or any official application.
The tool Hugh is using allows him to either build his own malicious APK, short for Android Package Kit file, which can be easily downloaded into an Android phone, or he can bind his malicious app with other legitimate apps. These malwares allow the scammer to access almost everything on the victim's phone.
Camera, storage, mic, location, contacts, SMS.
And then the threat actor, the hacker, right? They just need to boot their server in here, and that's it. They build the app. It's just within a second.
Once downloaded onto a device, the malware communicates with a server or a computer program belonging to the scammer. The scammer can, through this program, execute commands like stealing sensitive data.
Okay, so in other words, I tell it what to build.
His help to see if he can trace the source of the malware.
You can see the command and control server, maxisystem.co. Yeah, it's still active. It's working right now.
Maxi is the name of the app with malicious malware built in that's circulating in Singapore. Hugh has managed to track down not one but several IP addresses where the app could have originated from. This means there could be more than one scammer spreading the same malware app.
I find out there's more than 7,000 the same thing. This is in August, right?
Certificate issued August
Right.
26.
But there is another one, the same.
Have been evolving rapidly. With malwares, victims can be robbed without them knowing. Will it get more sophisticated than this? I want to know. What is the next big to do if your phone isn't? This could possibly mean that
Tuy nhiên thì đã có những cái cuộc tấn công nó đã xảy ra trên iOS.
Text messages,
Vietnamese police done about
Trước các cái hoạt động giám sát an ninh mạng để kịp thời phát hiện ra các cái hành vi.
the BKAV. This tech company specializes in cybersecurity and software, and even make their own smartphones, which makes them experts on detecting malware on our phones.
Hiệu năng của máy tính thì đang rất là cao. Đấy, trên điện thoại có thể là pin nó hết nhanh hơn, có cái dấu hiệu nó bất thường.
So what can you do if you inadvertently unleash a malware in your phone? Experts say it's best to do a factory reset. Go to settings, turn off your mobile internet connection, your Wi-Fi, and your Bluetooth.
I see my primary